interest theme of deep human interest coming up now. Something that comes from I don't know what I should say. This instinct to survive, instinct to tide over crisis, instinct to somehow cope, that hits at the very basics of life. So this is not entrepreneurship, this is not anything glamorized, but it's just about how do I tide over a particular crisis, a curveball that's been thrown by life at me, and we collectively across the globe had this curveball of COVID, which tore lives apart, which took away lives, livelihoods, a lot of stuff. So that, at the same time, has also shown up stories of resilience, stories of courage, cases where people have managed to pull through somehow or the other, some by the sheer skin of their teeth, but some also through strategies and through a certain mindset. So are there lessons, and I'm sure there are lots of them, so to hear some of those specific lessons, to hear some of those specific stories, we have this next session coming up, which is stories of resilience during the pandemic. For that, we have two entrepreneurs who survived the pandemic. So, they're real life examples of what I spoke about, the gut and the spirit to endure. So we have Rashmi Daga and Suviggya Bansall in conversation. I request them to come on stage, please. Rashmi and Suviggya, please. Put your hands together. Okay. Letting go of a cushy corporate career sounds very aspirational and glamorous when read on a social media post. But when seasoned market research professional Suviggya Bansall did so in February 2020, just on before pandemic, the decision was driven by love and passion. But she was prepared for the pitfalls too. Her enthusiasm to bring to Bangalore the North Indian street food that she loves resulted in the birth of Gopaljee Café. So she's the owner of Gopaljee Café. The Delhi-style chole bhature with different spices sourced all the way from Delhi, and the chaat in particular hit it. How many of you have heard of FreshMenu, sampled, eaten their food, or that sort of? So we have two people who represent the extreme in the culinary spectrum. And Rashmi Daga is the founder of FreshMenu. Welcome and thank you a lot for coming here. Thanks for being here now. FreshMenu brings world cuisine to our plates and facilitates culinary exploration through innovation in food experiences. Rashmi herself is passionate about startups and loves the thrill of solving problems every day. Before launching FreshMenu in 2014, she worked in Tutor Vista, Ola, and Bluestone, and bootstrapped a venture called Café. Welcome and thank you a lot. So over to you.
Hello everyone. It's an immense pleasure to meet Rashmi, who has been a path setter and trailblazer for every budding entrepreneur like me, especially in the food tech space. We already know that in pandemic we all have seen the grim times. The time was extremely difficult for all of us. We were grappling with the health challenges, and many businesses had their own unique set of challenging. The pandemic, unprecedented times, had a huge, impact on the supply chain. How did you handle, given the fact that most of your produce was fresh and the raw material? How did you manage that time?
Actually, I'll go back to the day pandemic hit and especially the lockdowns, and it was all of a sudden that everything was shut down. I think one, as an entrepreneur, you have just not prepared for this kind of shock. Nobody ever thought, and obviously your optimism said, okay, it'll be 1 week, it'll be 2 weeks, we'll get over it. So you don't have to do something really drastic. Day one response is not a drastic response. The biggest was take care of people, settle down things, and see what we can manage. And I think the first week was extremely chaotic. More than supply chain, I think the biggest hurdle was keeping the team together, because everybody was panicking. We deal with a lot of our staff, which is migrant, and they just could not move. And I think just dealing with the human side of it was probably way bigger as a response, Because I think from a menu or a supply chain point of view, whatever is available, you'll make that.
Yeah.
So I think the menu very quickly moved to a very a subversion of the menu of what was available. And you know,
Yes.
if this week X material is available, you'll work with that. Next week something else is available, you'll work with that. That flexibility is because you control the full supply chain and the menu on your side. But I think more than the supply chain, it was just the human part of managing the system. And the first 20 days, because we were all very finding it very hard to move around. First time we went back to kitchens, and a lot of ants came back that we've been working for the company and you guys were sitting at home. So, you know, and it hits you hard while you've been thinking constantly for it. Just physical presence made so much of a difference.
Coming to my next question, food industry has been one of the hardest hits in pandemic. So a lot of restaurants were facing the losses. They were mulling over layoffs and a lot of job cuts. Did any of the situation come across to you? I mean, did you have to deal with the situation when you had to cut down the operations and it led to the loss of manpower?
Absolutely. I think all of us have dealt with it in whatever was best possible at that moment. Whatever you understood, you dealt with it. In hindsight, some of those were good decisions. In obviously, in some were bad decisions because they were very, very short term in nature. But I think so were times, and I think the biggest lesson I've learned is you only know so much and you can operate in only those constraints. So I think let go of your guilt of whether you've done right or wrong. And I think that was my biggest learning during the pandemic.
So innovation was the key to survival during the pandemic. What are some of the turnkey innovations you saw at FreshMenu? How did it change the way you do business today?
A big change that we made was honestly stabilizing the menu. I think we were one of those people who thrived in innovation of a daily changing menu. And we put the whole system to a lot of rigor doing that. And I think a big takeaway from these times has been that a stable menu, stable supply chain, lesser number of SKUs, lesser number of SKUs in terms of supply chain is what makes it an easier business to deal with, lower cost, better efficiencies. And I think the good part was when scale came down, and again in hindsight, the good part is when scale came down, we had actually a lot more free time to take stronger measures to change things. So a lot has changed about the operating model on how we thought of menu, how we thought of supply chain, how we thought of number of people to do the business. So we've improved unit economics in these times because we were forced to. We would not have survived if we did not improve.
Were there any meal innovations as well? Did you come out with the new categories, more healthier options, given that people were very conscious about the fact? Like in our case, we were mostly dealing with the comfort food, and suddenly overnight we realized people are looking for healthier options. They just want the food for their daily needs more than going for chole bhature or the chaats. So was it similar at your? Did you?
Honestly, no. Except obviously a few things about the immunity part and all did come in for a short period of time. What we realized was what we do, we just have to do a good job about that. I think one of our takeaways was customers at this point of time were looking for safer choices. They were looking for more quality and controls behind the scene than really menu innovation. So actually, last 2 years have been much lesser about menu innovation, but a lot more about quality, stability, and the process behind the food, which is what we worked on.
So, as I understand, your business heavily depends upon the deliveries, with people falling sick during the COVID times, leading to health and fear disruptions. What key steps were taken to manage the deliveries?
Actually, a lot of that is behind us, and some of it has become, I think, a part of routine now. For example, all the food started going in paper bags, which people could tear and leave outside their house and keep the food in. For a few months, I think all of us were grappling with the fact that customers thought COVID would transfer with the boxes. And it took a few months when data started coming out that it does not transfer with surfaces, etc. But I think we've figured out between temperature checks for staff, between hygiene, contactless delivery, leaving the bag outside while people can pick it up later. I think some of those were done.
With
But
respect to delivery boys, did you face challenges like people are not coming?
it's still a challenge. A lot of people have left the big cities. And I think they will not come back to big cities probably for another 12 to 24 months. So I think labor shortage is a real challenge that all the big metros are facing, partly because how we all dealt with the pandemic. All the migrants were not taken care of, and today they're not willing to come back.
So, how did you make these deliveries? I mean, if there was a shortage and
No, see, honestly, business was lower. So I think we've lived with it. Today, when you want to grow the business, today the challenge is you're not finding enough staff.
yeah. Marketing and sales is extremely Yeah, marketing sales is extremely momentous for our kind of business. Were there any specific initiatives taken to mitigate the negative impact of COVID?
I think something that worked the best was authentic communication. I remember there was a video that I put on a selfie and shot about what are we doing in these times, had the best response. So honestly, it just did not need advertising, it just needed authentic communication.
Sure. Since we are in the literature festival, a little off from the topic, but what is your favorite book? Any excerpts you would like to share with us?
Actually, I don't read a lot, but some of the books that have worked for me, and goal, I think operations book, and the business that we run is an ops intensive business, and I think I've gone back to it multiple times because every day you're solving operational problems. So operations, the book is goal. The other book that made a lot of impact was Hard Things About Hard Things.
Well, obviously.
When you're in difficult times and you read it, it really hits you. Some of the other off late I've read, I think everybody's read it, Ikigai, and like you're trying to find some new things. Today, last book I picked up was Super Consumers, trying to go back and figure out, what can you do on the consumer side, and how do you go back and lead the business again now that we've survived. I think it's time back to thrive. So you have to change the way you've dealt with the business.
Any specific book that you read during the pandemic time which helped you keep yourself in a positive mind space?
No, honestly, okay, it works very differently for me, and this is maybe counterintuitive. When I try to talk about things from people or books, actually your own thinking is clouded by what is being said there. At times, I found it easier to deal with it myself, and then it's a more authentic response than hoping to find a solution from somewhere. So you're not trying to solve problems. And honestly, for the kind of business I run, I've not been able to find time to read more while I would try to pick that up, but I'm not finding time.
I'll keep it short and sweet. One last question. Being a stalwart in the restaurant business, what advice do you have for a budding solopreneur like you?
Tough one. I'm okay. When I entered food as a space, obviously food as a space is huge, right? It's like an ocean, and we all believe we'll make here a big business, a large business. It's a tough business because there's so many things that pull you back. I think the only, I think bringing honesty to this business, bringing focus on quality and taste of food, I think is the only paramount part. All other problems can be solved. So if you are macro clear of what you're solving and what you're doing, then I think it's easier to deal with the day-to-day grind that this business puts you through. Otherwise, it's great. I think it's very creative. It's innovative. There's so much to like. You think about food all the time. So I think for solopreneurs, I think the only thing is bring clarity to why you're doing this and what are you really solving for. Because you'll not be able to solve all problems. So you'll have to pick your battles and let somebody else pick the rest of the battles.
Sounds great. Any questions from the audiences?
So, Kashyap, the hardest part is when you deal with food as a business and you're solving so much of back-end challenges that you become a food critic. Like most of the times, I don't open my mouth about food choices because most of the times you're only criticizing what is not right about it. Personally, what works best for me within Fresh Menu's menu is actually the Mexican burrito bowl because I think the way we put it together and way it completes a meal experience in one box. I think we did a great job. Today we are right now trying to go back and innovate of what next few years, what are the kind of meals people will take because you need to disrupt what you've created. I think we were the first ones to create the bowls. Now I think we have to be first ones to create something else.
Are you a foodie?
No, I'm not a foodie.
Okay.
Actually, initially, yes, because first few months when you were doing trials, when you run a food business, and there's so much that you're learning, and you want to try everything, you want to taste everything, and you eat a stomach full every time you're eating multiple meals. Obviously, I'm like at least 10 kgs more than when I started.
Same here.
So, I think the biggest learning is do food trials at 4 p.m. After you've had your lunch, when you're not hungry, you have to try something and taste it. You can't eat full meals out of it.
Any other question?
Yeah. Okay, so maybe my personal belief, but I feel the food industry is one of the volatile market what we see. I mean, now we have the COVID and pandemic thing, but pre that also there were many startups which came and flourished as well. So what do you think? What the entrepreneur, I mean, did it wrong or were not correct that it led them to flourish? One is that one. Second is, when is fresh menu penetrating to tier 2 and tier 3 city? I come from Jamshedpur and I don't have fresh menu over there. So
Yeah,
what is
I
the
mean-
roadmap for fresh menu over there?
No, FreshMenu, I think our intent is to build India's biggest fresh foods business, right? And I'm sure after we cover tier ones well, we will come to tier two and we will think of a new business model for the rest of the markets. I think food is an opportunity. A lot of times, I've heard people, I want to open a cafe, meko, एक restaurant banana hai, meko Goa में एक shack banana hai. A lot of times people think of food as a front-end business. Food actually, when you start the business, you realize it's like the tip of the iceberg. Like menu on your table, etc., is like 10% of the business. Everything else is behind it, which a lot of people are not geared because they did not plan for it, they did not think for it. Also, as a business, it's a mix of art and science, like menu and creativity, and love for food is very creative side of it. But then there's this massive efficiencies and operations and supply chain part of it. So I think it needs this combination, which I feel like a lot of people, when they get into the business and get into the multiple moving parts of it, is why some businesses will succeed massively and some businesses will shut down also very quickly. So food has very high mortality. A lot of people shut down the business in less than 12 months. But I think it's the nature of the industry and the nature of it's very hard to manufacture brand success. Like you can do everything right and still your brand may not be successful. So I think that's a crux of it.
Oh, sorry. You have a cold chain that allows you to run the operations.
So, sir, actually, FreshMenu thought of it very differently. We believed India is a fresh eating country. We make 4 meals a day at our homes fresh. And we believe that the long-term multi-decade opportunity is in doing fresh food, last mile. So, FreshMenu is actually probably one of the only few cloud kitchen businesses which really do last mile fresh cooking daily. So we don't rely on a cold chain. Obviously, there's some material that has to reach our kitchens chilled because that's a condition on which it will work. But the intent is to really cook like your home kitchen in a neighborhood kitchen and deliver fresh food to you. So for most of the customers, I think we've done a very bad job at communicating this. Let's say the home tiffin box that you'll carry was also cooked at 8 a.m. in the morning. But the food that FreshMenu will deliver to you at 1 p.m. in your office will actually be cooked at 12:30. So it's actually fresher than your home dabba. It's very hard to communicate that benefit, but we've actually worked on fresh cooking.
Just a quick question. Like you mentioned, food industry is extremely competitive and cutthroat, I would say. So once as an entrepreneur, you start with a business model, say for instance, a fresh menu, and then someone else comes up with almost exact replica, say the bowl company or something else. So at that point, how would you react to it? Will you change your USP or will you keep trying to innovate, or is there any way for entrepreneurs to protect themselves from being short run by?
So after 8 years of running FreshMenu, I've done startups and I've worked at startups. I think execution is the key. The moat is in execution 99% of the times. While, and you meet a lot of young founders, like, my idea, I can't disclose you the whole idea. It's a stealth startup and, maybe you'll copy it. And you can't copy it. And if somebody was good at copying it before you can launch it, let him launch it. I would think that execution is the moat.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll just take one question. We're running late, like you had scheduled, but we can take one.
Hi there, my name is Prithvi Madhukar. I'm an entrepreneur and a business owner myself. I specifically wanted to ask you, what are the challenges, unique challenges that you have faced as a woman, either in your industry or in the entrepreneurial space? Because I think that a lot of conversations that have happened today were that, okay, you can only do certain things when you have the freedom as a woman. What's your take on that?
So let's address the elephant in the room. Women face bias every day.
Absolutely.
Okay, I think a generation before us, women who started working 20 years back, 30 years back, would have faced way more bias. So I can't imagine operating in those bias situations, but I know the bias situation that I've dealt with. But see, I think all of us are growing the tribe. All of us are taking it forward. And I think the generation that will come after us and after that would face much, much lesser, because but it's like all of us have to chip at the problem and work at it, but the bias is there. And I think there's obviously multiple aspects, right, from what you as an individual want to do, what the society expects you to do, what your family expects you to do. It's always, I think a lot of it is combination, and it can't be pinpoint of, why somebody is able to start up and why somebody is not able to start up. And maybe everyone does not need to start up. But I think women today, I feel like, and I've worked for now almost 20 years, and there's a huge change in, how things have moved in these 20 years. I'm sure next 20 years are going to be way better and way brighter. I think we just have to keep going on.
And unique challenges, ma'am, for your.
Oh, unique challenges of
Yes.
food. Food, women are not there. If you notice, the entire industry is male dominated, right?
Yes,
So I'll tell you, most of the times the challenge is, madam, aapko kya pata hai? Aapko kya aata hai? Aap bana ke dikhaiye. Right? And you have to cross over the hurdle where, one, you have to know your business, you have to know the food, you have to know the chef's language. And there is this whole emotional pressure of how can I report to a woman? And for women, and honestly, it's something that, I usually don't want to say very regularly. You travel between a bechari to a bitch all the time. Very well said.
Absolutely. Well said. Well said.
Oh, and look at the irony. At home, women are supposed to handle the hearth, right? They're supposed to be in the kitchen, but not so in commercial establishments, not so in restaurants. You hardly find women representation in India, right?
No, and it's very hard. And now, for a lot of logistical reasons, it's very hard to have women-operated kitchens. But I'm just saying that as a founder, for a lot of people, the biggest issue is how do you accept women as a boss?
Yes.
So what is the women-men ratio in your business?
Oh, there's hardly any women. Obviously, in corporate office, there are few women, but entire business is otherwise men.
Men dominated, yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. That was a really
Okay,
nice
thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for this insightful conversation. Thanks, Suviggya. I'd like Shankar to come on stage to give them. I saw the start.
Before that, I have a question, one last question. Ganesh, one last question. So, how is FreshMenu dealing with the problem of food waste? Is, what I want to know. Yeah.
How are you dealing with the problem of food waste?
So food wastage, I think the fresh model that we opted to work with reduces wastage drastically, because we're cooking pretty much close to demand, like on order. The amount of wastage, even if the demand fluctuates in an online business, fluctuations could be pretty rampant. So I think because we cook close to an order, the wastage percentage is actually very, very low compared to traditional restaurants. We also have a lot more data capability to predict and plan and look at the menu, look at what will sell. And now with 8 years of data, I think we are far, far better in terms of material management, supply chain management, and also wastage. But it's an ongoing solution. You keep doing menu engineering to reduce wastage. So the other thing is, what ingredient can go in, 2 dishes versus 4 dishes. You will do that so that the wastage on that ingredient is much lesser. So there is whole front end and back end solution to that.
All right, thank you. I invite Shankar, our co-founder, to come on stage and please give away a small gift. Coconut pieces to Rashmi and Suviggya.